and they started explaining to me about how their generation came to LA.
Majority of the blacks was coming from the South then, and after the war, the train was called the Argonaut. It was a train that stopped at every little town from Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Before it got to Union Station, it was stopped by Central Avenue, and all the black people had to get off.
And they came here because they were trying to escape racism, and for economic reasons, a lot of factories were hiring. They got here, and a lot of prejudice here and racism here as far as the job markets and as far as blacks buying homes and moving into certain neighborhoods they weren't allowed to.
You could argue in the late 40s and 50s, probably the most exciting, important thing happening musically was on Central Avenue, where rhythm and blues were going.
Central Avenue would and should have been a cultural landmark.
Lot of action, lot of action. Downtown Hotel, Downbeat, The Last Word, Nemo's. And I got out here in 1942, and I've been going out there ever since. From 42 to 50, it was jumping.
Central Avenue paid for all the police vacations and retirements. Central Avenue Vice Squad was basically the money collectors for the LAPD, and they basically ran, a protection and extortion racket on the clubs. They had to pay off the LAPD. The LAPD took millions out of the black community and the black music scene in the 1940s before Parker took over. Under Chief Parker's reign, he declared war on race mixing on Central Avenue and set about deliberately to destroy, the most vital music scene in the country. Those were the days where the LAPD, of course, recruited police in the South. They went down and looked for Southern whites that had been in the Army and Marine Corps and brought them out here. I mean,
straight to the LAPD.
Yeah, Parker had in mind exactly what kind of police force, he wanted. Parker was, of course, not corrupt. He was just, a steadfast, racist. So where did the first black gangs appear? Well, if you start reading through the files of the old California Eagle, which was a magnificent community paper, the major African-American paper in LA, from 1946 to 1950, there was a really powerful civil rights movement in Los Angeles, and people were fighting to break out of the Central Avenue ghetto, to move south of Slauson, to move to the west, beginning to more integrate the high schools.
Compton was white, a great part of South Central was white, Inglewood was white, Gardena was white.
First black kid to move into that area moved on 62nd and Hooper in 1946. There were Italians, there were Germans, there were Russians, Armenians, Lithuanians, what they call the Croatians and Serbs. When you can't live where you want to live, when you can't go where you want to go without someone saying something to you, there's a problem. And every day I was called names. With no brothers and sisters, I began with a bad attitude. And I began fighting the little white kids every day.
And you can track literally week by week attacks on black kids in the high schools and in junior high schools. And what you see emerging are black youth fighting back against attacks by white gangs and beginning to create, what they didn't call gangs at the time. They were just groups of kids united to fight off, the people who stoned them when they came to school or ambushed them after school.
The whites were predominant in the area, so we banded together at Slauson Park.
There were well-organized white gangs, some of which then continued and lived on for 20 more years, like the infamous Spook Hunters.
We used to get attacked by white boys, namely a group called Spook Hunters, who were all over Inglewood, Southgate, Linwood, Hollywood, Maywood, and all the other woods.
Yeah, they had a gang called the Spook Hunters.
Yeah.
We shut them down. They had a black man hanging on the back of their jacket with a rope.
Spook Hunters was an umbrella term. That was a term like, black people are spooks or whatever, and we're white boys, and we're going to catch them. What exactly happened?
Well, white boys and them 41 fools cut down and ride by and call you all nigger, this, that, and another. And we fought with them.
Once I learned about these white gangs, I learned about the response to these white gangs. A gang called the Slausons, a gang called the Farmers, the Businessmen, a gang called the Gladiators. These are all black gangs. And I learned about these famous gang members back then.
I started to hear about Bird and about Chinaman, and then these are Slossers, and it dawned on me, and me and my buddies on the block, we're in the Slauson area, so it's starting at the end of grammar school. We said, well, we're going to be Slossers.
We are from the South, so when we come to the city, we was confused about prejudice.
Racism and prejudice was the order of the day. It happened every day.
We couldn't go there, we couldn't go here, we couldn't go there. So I call us, we're not gangs, we are the pioneers that open up Los Angeles where we can be in Centinela Park, or we can be across Crenshaw.
And Gardena and Inglewood, these existing gangs, the Slausons, the Gladiators, the businessmen, who kind of like fought the white boys throughout the city. Then there's no white boys to fight.
Jesse Owens' Park used to be called Sportsman's Park. From 61 to 63, we fought the white cats from Inglewood because they said that blacks couldn't come swimming in the swimming pool. So eventually we got the park. Eventually the name changed, not because we were the toughest or the baddest, but because after, during those 60s, it was the white flight movement, and they started leaving anyway.
Everybody's kind of boxed in on top of. People are amazed that some people can be, my age and older, 30, and still have some affiliation, or still bang, or still have some loyalty to these subcultures.
Because what I think a lot of people don't comprehend is the most obvious thing, which is that in the 60s, we still had an economy in this country that valued the strength of an unskilled man. If you were a working class guy, you were tough and loyal and courageous, that meant something in the workplace.
So guys would be in high school, and guys would be banging, and guys would be kind of messing up. Then they'll get to adulthood, they'll get a kid, and they can pretty much segue into one of those industry jobs.
By the early mid-1970s, semi-skilled jobs were collapsing and disappearing in cities all across the country.
It used to be my father, y'all's fathers, or whatever, whenever people moved here, there was factories.
And now, that shit's closed. Rubber factory's gone, General Motors gone. That's right there in Alameda. Industrial America was right there. You know what I'm saying? That shit died. I saw it die.
The 14 biggest factories in LA closed in the late 70s, early 80s, and stripped away the hopes of a whole generation of people. You have to imagine how the history of LA would be different today if those plants still existed. To the collapse of those factories, you lost the workplace as an organizing base.
I seen a man across the street from me lose his job. I seen the people down the street lose their job. I seen uncles, cousins, and lose their job, right?
The reason that supposedly young black men, desert families is they can't earn a family wage to support a family. One of the great racist myths in this country is the death of the black family, or the non-existent black family. People trace this back to slavery. Black Americans have never had family structures. I mean, there's not a more obnoxious, or misleading myth around. If you actually look at the figures, the collapse of the black family occurs in the 1970s, and occurs in direct proportion as, young black men are just systematically shut out of the labor market.
So there go the jobs that we probably was going to be going after once our parents became supervisors up in that shit, and probably would have pulled us in. They lost.
Bone, if you had 50,000 unionized warehouse jobs, you could turn probably 50,000 gang members into industrial workers overnight. And if gangs are pathological, they're also heroic in a way. They do, or at least did in one period, embody values of self-sacrifice, of loyalty to people, and love above all.
With the jobs leaving, I think what it did, it expanded like the subculture world as being like your total world.
Gangs somehow carried on, a residue of the unity and pride, but it was now narrowly focused and wasn't the whole community anymore. It was it was a particular street, but it has to be understood against the context of just the devastation, the destruction of the economic opportunities.
Gangs was a proposal. You could make money off of them. Everybody, the police department got new cars, new computers, new helmets, bigger guns. All of this, gangs was profitable to everybody who dealt with them.
I don't think there's anything that the police really fear more than an end to gang warfare. It, for them, is a perfect situation, a war they can't ever really stop, but they constantly, profit from it.
People saw a dollar sign attached to gangs.
The police didn't want people to work with gangs.